Hello, I'm Ed Bishop, and today I'm starting a new thing. For those who know me, this isn't really that new, other than I'm putting it in podcast form. But it has been nearly 4 decades since I did it regularly. See that guy there on the right? Yeah, that was me with a soccer haircut, hosting a show called KC Sports Talk back home in Kansas City in the late 1980s. It was my dream to do that for a living. But as happens to most of us, life took me down another path. Through marriage, children, a corporate career, none of which I'd ever trade, by the way. And now I'm here. Now I live in the Pittsburgh area, which is another tremendous sports hotbed, and I'm finally circling back to what I love to do, which is hosting a show. And while I've done some radio and public address announcing over the decades, I'm not a sports insider. I've truly spent most of my days as just a fan in the stands, and that's the name for my new podcast. So how did this love of sports begin? Let's go back to 1967. It's the last summer the A's will call Kansas City their home, and my dad had procured tickets to a doubleheader with the New York Yankees so he could take his 3-year-old son to his first baseball games. Now, there's no footage of either of those games currently available, but a big thank you to Pete Goodwin, who appears to be a longtime Red Sox fan in Boston. He posted this footage from July of 1967 when the Red Sox were playing the A's at Kansas City Municipal Stadium. So that way you can see exactly how it was then. And there, in all of owner Charlie Finley's splendor of Kelly green, Fort Knox gold, and wedding gown white, was the first team and the first stadium I fell in love with. The Chiefs would win Super Bowl IV following the 1969 season. My friends and I would spend hours playing Nerf football in the neighbor's front yard during the fall and winter, when we weren't spending hours playing kickball in that same yard during the spring and summer. I started playing Little League basketball and baseball and watching more and more games on TV. And then I finally got my first trip to an NFL game for a preseason matchup. Now we're in August of 1972, and it's the defending Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys who came to play only the second game ever at Arrowhead Stadium. Dallas defeated a Chiefs team that was past its Super Bowl years and past its Super Bowl prime and beginning slow decline. Roger Staubach's Cowboys beat Len Dawson's Chiefs 24-3 on that Saturday night, and 8-year-old me was hooked on football, and I've never looked back. Later that fall, I would see the former Cincinnati Royals, which had been transplanted and newly rechristened as the Kansas City Omaha Kings, as they hosted the Detroit Pistons in the first NBA game I ever attended. I went to a fair number of Kings games at both Municipal Auditorium and Kemper Arena before the Kings relocated to Sacramento in 1985. The following April, I would finally get my first game at what was then called Royal Stadium. Poetic justice would be served as the world champion Oakland A's made their first ever visit to the ballpark that would have been theirs had they stayed in Kansas City as they took on the Royals. It was only the fourth game in the new ballpark's history, but you would have thought it was a World Series Game 7 when the Royals walked it off in the bottom of the 14th to win 5-4. 1974 brought the NHL to Kansas City, though briefly in the form of the Kansas City Scouts. But after 2 years, it was on to Denver, where they became the Colorado Rockies. That is, before the Rockies were a 1993 expansion baseball team. But if you're under 50, you may only know the hockey squad as the New Jersey Devils. But I fell in love with hockey during those 2 years and loved the handful of Scouts games I got to attend in person. You know, I really was never a great skater, but I really wanted to play something with that speed, with the same excitement as hockey. And strangely enough, I just had to wait a few short years and it would happen. It was late in the spring of 1981, and I tuned in to watch a new sport that was rumored to be coming to KC that fall. It was called the Major Indoor Soccer League, so I thought I'd watch it and give it a try. The The championship game between the St. Louis Steamers and the New York Arrows came down to the final minute before the Arrows grabbed the title. That lit a fire under me that still burns today. The Arrows won in the final minute of play, and I was psyched for the arrival of our own team, announced later that summer, the Kansas City Comets. I was at Kemper Arena with almost 16,000 others for opening night on November 28, 1981, and I loved it so much I went to multiple games that year. I got season tickets the following year and held those until after I graduated college and started covering the team for, you guessed it, KC Sports Talk. Going back to the spring after the Comets' arrival, I started playing my new favorite game that did not require me to skate. I played indoor soccer for over a dozen years, and I even had the pleasure of attending a professional tryout camp while visiting a friend with the MISL's Phoenix Pride in 1984. And while I didn't end up as a player, I would eventually live out one of my broadcasting dreams and become the Comets' public address announcer in 1989. I spent 15 years off and on behind the PA mic for the Comets, and also the Kansas City Attack, and the National Women's Soccer League's FC Kansas City, before moving to the Pittsburgh area. I would also help launch the Kansas City Blades Hockey Club and doing their game production for a year in 1990, and later I would fill in a few times behind the PA mic for the Kansas City Mavericks of the ACHL in the 20-teens. I did game production for Kansas City Explorers World Team Tennis for 9 seasons in the 1990s, and I did the PA for the inaugural year of the Kansas City Brigade of the Arena Football League in 2006. Frankly, I consider myself extremely fortunate as I've been able to enjoy sports up close as well as being a fan in 2 of the greatest sports cities in America. So that's the Cliff's Notes version of my sports bio, and I hope you enjoyed the long and fun journey I've taken over the years. In upcoming podcasts, I want to share knowledge, perspectives, stories, and experiences with you. And while there will be a lot of sports topics, I also want to blend in some entertainment, some local culture, talk with some interesting people, and cover anything else that perhaps you or I may be just a fan in the stands of. If you've enjoyed what you've seen and heard today, I hope you'll hit like and subscribe so you can be notified of new shows and tune in. Also, please feel free to comment. What are some of the key moments you experienced that made you the sports fan you are today? And what are some of the topics that you as a fan are interested in hearing about? Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you next time.